Welcome to the J.D. Levy and Associates Calibration Point Podcast. Our podcasts are designed to bring a conversational exploration of key topics that we believe will provide value and insight to those serving in the nonprofit sector. We will highlight new developments in the field, latest research, and things we're learning from our own clients that we can share.
I want to welcome everybody to this month's edition of the Calibration Point Podcast. Really excited to have a previous guest back on, Jay Height, who's the Executive Director of the Shepherd Community Center in Indianapolis. And Shepherd has many accolades as an organization, as a understanding the model of poverty intervention. They've been recognized nationally, both in secular and faith-centered arenas. But today, we're not here to talk about Shepherd directly. We're here to talk about a unique aspect that Shepherd brings to the table, that a lot of this uniqueness comes from something its Executive Director, Jay Height, brings and brought into it. And that is Shepherd has a really uncanny ability to navigate political and legislative influence. And Jay, we're just going to let you kind of share around this. I want to qualify and use a word that you like to use, and that we're really talking about advocacy. We're not talking about lobbying. We're talking about the strategy of grassroots mobilization and influencing legislation and policymakers. But I do want to qualify for the audience. Contrary to a lot of popular belief, the IRS has given nonprofit organizations a lot of latitude in lobbying, both by way of budget and time. So if you're ever concerned about your organization engaging in lobbying activities, please do your due diligence and make sure you understand the stipulations, because there really is a lot of latitude for organizations to be engaged in lobbying. While that's not our topic today. Jay, you came into this sector from a background in media, from a background in politics and leadership. And now, and you and I have worked together for a lot of years. I've seen kind of the magic that you do on just mobilizing relationships across the political divide, across the ideological divide, being able to position who Shepherd is as an amazing value add to policymakers, legislators, both citywide, statewide, and at a congressional level. So Jay, thank you for being here. And I just want to spend some time with you and allow you just to share with us what we need to know in the nonprofit space on being effective at navigating political and legislative influence.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. I think the premise of this is your company and Shepherd Community doesn't have a relationship. You and myself do.
Right.
People connect to people. Organizations don't connect. And so elected officials and those in authority are the same way. And it is imperative for us to begin to know them, pray for them, and figure out how we can serve them and help them. For many of them, it's providing them information about issues and understanding of things. I have a lot of conversations to help those elected officials understand what inflation does to those in poverty, because it is not equitable. You and I can go to the grocery store and, man, it's like, ouch, that hurt. But I'm not putting food back, and I'm not having to go without a meal. I mean, look at me. I haven't missed a meal in my life. The doctor wish I would, but the idea is that many of my neighbors have to skip meals. They have to. They get to the checkout line and realize they don't have enough money. And I want our elected officials to understand why gas prices so quickly impact my neighbors, and why food prices are so. And so decisions they're making are important. As I have got into this role, and both as a pastor and as the executive director, I am not partisan. I have my own beliefs. I'm going to vote the way I do, but I don't put yard signs. I don't endorse because the minute I do that, shepherd is the endorsement.
Right.
Because I acknowledge I carry the mantle of shepherd, and so now I will meet with elected officials. I will talk with them. I don't care if you're R or D. We're gonna have time. I want to be like Nehemiah and go to the king and be able to advocate. Nehemiah knew the king. He served the king, but he knew a little bit about him so that when he went before him, the king wasn't like, who's this guy standing in front of me? And I think many times that's what we need to do, is begin to create relationships and understand. So on a regular basis, I'm trying to meet with different elected officials. I'm having breakfast, lunch, giving them tours of Shepherd, trying to explain issues of poverty and how that might impact them, whether it's our governor, whether it's a senator, whether it's our Congress folks, or state house, state senator, city council. All of those are positions of influence that we should be able to have a relationship with. I think the model for me is William Wilberforce.
Okay.
And if you want to read a great book, it's Eric Metaxas' book, Amazing Grace, I think is it, about William Wilberforce, the British politician.
Yep.
Who could have been prime minister, but he gave that up so that he could advocate and impact that. It really comes down to, how are we being salt? And so we're called to be salt and light, and so he lived that out. We know what he did in eliminating slavery long before we did here in the States, in England.
Right.
But there are so many other things that he did. He would meet and have relationships. He had what he called the Clapham Circle, and they would meet and discuss these issues. And so vaccines for poor children were brought to England by his efforts. Animal rights were brought to England. You could not abuse your animals. So the Humane Society was based off of work, because he said it's God's creation. We should steward them, as he talks about in Genesis. We don't worship it, we steward it, and
Right.
he was very vocal about that. He also brought the arts, because he said the arts give glory to God, and so I see this as really, how are we as Christ followers or how are we as not-for-profit leaders? How am I as a pastor? How am I living this out? And how am I impacting? How am I being salt? And so I want to live that out each and every day. I want, as someone who cares very much for those in poverty, to advocate. We can't always lob grenades,
Right.
and just be there to complain. I was listening to a podcast where they were interviewing a guy who used to coach in the NBA, now in college. And they said, how do you work with refs? And he said, well, first of all, I don't yell at them at everything. Because he said, if you yell at them about everything, they'll hear nothing you say.
Right.
And he says, it's for me to build the relationship, for me to say, that was a good call. Hey, did you see this happening over there? And he said, we could have that banter. And he said, that way, if they make up a really bad call, then I can complain. But if you're always complaining, they'll tune you out. Well, I think that applies to this. If all I'm ever doing at City Hall or at the State House or at the Capitol is complaining and being against things, we have no equity. I want to be and help provide voice to my neighbors on different issues, and to help educate folks that many times decisions being made were well-intentioned, but have unintended consequences. And so that's really where we need to be speaking into that. And I think one of the things we like to do is we like to invite elected officials here. We talk a lot about names and faces and statistics. Well, guess what? They're real people, and let's introduce them. Our Senator, Todd Young, came out and helped in a food distribution. And I said, Senator, what I want you to do is walk up and down the cars, introduce yourself, ask them questions. This is your opportunity to engage with your constituents and and educate yourself. I'm not worried about the photo op. I really want that to be an education. And
Right.
so, creating briefings, we don't need to write War and Peace. We need to do 1 or 2 page briefings. And so I do that, work with some of our team to just write something up that say, hey, here's things you might want to consider around housing, and something that we've been talking about both at the State House and locally, and is that unfortunately, as we have gentrification, longtime homeowners' property values are going up, so their taxes are going up, and it's forcing a displacement because they can no longer afford that.
Afford it, right?
And so what's happening in some cases is they're putting a sort of a grandfather clause that as long as that person owns that home, it doesn't it's not impacted and doesn't rise up. Well, those are the types of conversations we want to be having. We want to be common sense. We want to realize that government, despite what some think, do not have unlimited dollars,
Right.
And they generally care. I mean, granted, there's going to be fewer folks there that we would say you really don't care, but there's not-for-profit leaders who really don't care. There are pastors who don't really care. Not all of us. And so I found that it helps to give them, and that 1 or 2 page, because they read a lot, they get a lot of materials, so that we can help them just briefly look at something and catch a concept, and then be a resource for questions.
That's really good. So if I hear 2 things that I'm grabbing for what you're saying, number one is, I've always kind of lived by the quote of behind every question is a questioner, and not to get stuck on the question, but realize there's a person behind the question. And what I hear you saying is we need to realize, first of all, that the political leaders that we are working through and influencing are first individuals, and
Right.
Connect with them as a person. And the second is, what's the value that you can provide based on what you know about that leader? And your white papers are a good point, and I want to highlight 2 things. I mean, one is, you have been a voice from vice presidents of the United States and their cabinets to local neighborhood associations, and had them come to Shepherd to learn about how you intervene in poverty cultures. One thing that I just want to highlight that you recently did, that I know that just from knowing you, I know part was because it helps Shepherd position itself, but part was because I'm sure it's a great resource for the elected officials. I mean, you hired one of the best business schools in the country to study the economic impact that Shepherd creates. And for those listening, we're not talking about social impact, because that's a whole other set of equations. This was just what's the direct, primary, secondary economic impact of Shepherd by way of tax-based creation, wealth creation, purchase of goods and services. And that's a great example of Shepherd being very proactive and saying to elected officials, hey, we can help you, we can make your job easier because we can show you the impact we're creating in this district. And that's going to allow you to make better decisions as well. In addition to your white papers. And Jay, I go back to one of the things that you did early on was when you guys really, now it became known as community policing, but Shepherd was pioneering community policing because you were equipping leaders to understand what happens when police forces are connected to a ministry and they understand the families that they're helping and become a partner. Can you talk about how do you, Shepherd has done so many things around that. How do you keep track of, okay, here's my map of political influencers that we're navigating. How do I equip whom with what?
Well, you know me well enough, Jamie, and you know that I don't keep any kind of list.
Right.
Just look at my desk. No, I keep who are the folks that I want to impact, and then I find ways. I may send them an article that I read. So I had lunch with someone who's running for office, and I was able to advocate an initiative, and then I gave him information to say, see, here's why this is important. We were advocating for some special programming around early learning for early childhood. And this was information he didn't know. And so, because I'm a nerd and I read a lot, I collect that stuff and then I try to share it so that it can maybe help them spark some interest. We started the idea with the police officer and paramedic, and but the things we had to do is, we would say, or we were told, we need more than anecdotal. And many times in the not-for-profit ministry world, we're really good at the anecdotal, but then we went to IUPUI and hired a professor, and he did a study. And so then we were able to validate. And I think that's a discipline that we may say, well, I could take that same money and do something with. Yes, but this is about capacity building our own internal capacity, about us finding a way to better meet our needs in 5 years and making decisions. And so those are investments that bring a return.
Right.
Telling our story and then helping them have the tools so that when it's not uncommon for me to get a text or an email from, or even a phone call from an elected official and say, hey, I'm dealing with this. What would you think? Okay. Well, they know me and they know my number, and that's important. I had one elected official who would call me through COVID and he'd say, Jay, tell me, what's Main Street doing? What's happening on Main Street? He wanted to know about our neighborhood. He's making decisions at a very high level in our country, but he wanted to know how these neighbors, and so that's a voice that we can provide to them, and then help them do that. And again, this isn't done in a partisan way. We have to advocate both with Democrats as well as Republicans, and be able to be seen as someone who cares for the individual and cares for our neighbors and advocates on issues.
Yeah. So the third thing I just heard from you then is this idea of, I guess, really, maybe for an organization, taking stock of the voice that they have as an organization representing their constituencies. And, number one is realize that the official is a person and get to know the person, their interests, needs, et cetera. Number two is define what you have that you can provide that creates value, expertise, insight, knowledge. And then number three, which I think, Jay, is an extension of that, is be sure that we capture the voice of those that we serve so that you can really become the singular voice for that collective voice that allows you to be a resource in addition to your expertise to officials.
Yeah, and one of the things they'll hear me say this, I don't speak for my neighbors. I can tell you what I see, I can tell you what I hear, but if you really want to do it, come on, I'll go introduce you. And so being able to create a safe place. So I've taken them into the neighborhood, but I always make sure my neighbors are okay with me coming and say, I'm going to bring this person. And so they feel comfortable. And I'll say something like, okay, we're going to go over their house. We're going to stay on their porch. We're not going to go in. They may offer that, but they're just being respectful. We'll stay on the porch so that they feel comfortable. And I'll put some ground rules. I'll say something like, okay, we're not going to take a picture unless they tell you it's okay. Yep. And we're not going to bring a whole litany of folks around. We don't need a posse with us. And so they'll understand. I can remember one time it was really funny. We were taking our mayor around the neighborhood to see some housing projects. And we had our police officer and paramedic in there with us in the vehicle talking to him. And then all of a sudden, a guy in the neighborhood sees them and he wants to talk to our police officer and paramedic. So he starts chasing our vehicle on foot. Well, the security for the mayor is behind us, and things got a little dicey there for just a minute because they didn't know what was going on. And
wow.
It was humorous, but we want to make sure that it's a good experience. But I don't represent my neighborhood.
Right.
I can be a bridge, and that's really that. I always want to be careful.
Yeah, that's such a good point. That it may be kind of a fourth point as you start to be a voice for them, that you're not representing them, you're simply giving them a voice because you're a bridge to those who make decisions that impact their lives, that may not know the impact of those decisions. That's great.
Yes, I think, and I think we have to go into it. How can I serve them?
Right.
What can I do to help them? And so sometimes I'll say, representative, counselor, what is it that I could do? How could I help you do what you're doing?
Yeah, that's and that seems like that's a good calling card to put out as a nonprofit leader. We're here to help. Get to know them so we can figure out, again, what's the value that you already have? What's the value they need? Become a voice for your constituency, but then realize that you're a bridge and that you're not there to represent an ideology. You're there to simply help bridge people who care back to those you represent. And you represent, just for those listening, and what are we, 420 block neighborhood approximately?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a big area. There's a lot of lives that are being impacted. And, you as an organization and all of your entire team of volunteers and staff, you guys get to see that and help understand the nuances in relationship. Jay, this is really good. And I so appreciate your time. I've watched Shepherd over the years navigate, again, across political divides, across faith and non-faith divides, and just be a resource of giving value. And to your point, it's a great quote to close on. How can I serve the elected official or the person who's making those decisions, and what it is that we can bring to the table to better understand them, create more value, and ultimately equip them. And to that point, and Shepherd has seen that, that's a cycle that does come back around, because as you are equipping and planting those seeds, there are great benefits that come back to your organization. And Shepherd has witnessed that over the years, whether that's donors, whether that's people advocating for you, or people who will stand up on behalf of Shepherd, maybe when other people aren't, because they see the value that you've created. Jay, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom on this. Definitely greatly appreciate it, and look forward to having you back on.
Well, I tell folks we have to engage in our community in all facets. This is just one way. And thanks for listening. I always have an idea, and my wife says some of them are good.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks for listening to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point Podcast. If you have comments or ideas for future episodes, please reach out using the contact page on our website, jdlevyassociates.com.